And this is the study. We are all it is funded by NIDA on the Clinical Trials Network. And those of you who are not aware of it, NIDA has a clinical trials network that is funded across the nation with 13 nodes around the country. And a study is then, so to speak, put on this platform in various sites across these 13 nodes. And that's what the study is. And it's called STRIDE. We are actually proud of the acronym, so please feel free to use it. The study is patients who are eligible, that is methamphetamine, cocaine abusing patients. That should be their primary drug of use. If they are also engaged in alcohol abuse or other things, we are allowing, but their primary has to be cocaine, methamphetamine. And they are then randomized to either addition of exercise or addition of health education. And we can talk about that if there is time in the discussion about why this was put in as a control condition, but that the idea of what is the most ideal control condition for exercise has gained a lot of attention in the field with no real obvious solutions in my mind. Every solution that we come up with as a control condition for exercise has its inherent problems, so we can talk about what at least we saw in the health education component. Suffice it to say, we were very clear about two fundamental realities: is make it interesting for the patient so that they don't drop out at a higher rate than this group, and provide enough attention so that this group does not get more attention and therefore its effect is misunderstood or at least criticized as being related to attention. The primary outcome is a 12-week trial, and that is followed by an additional 6-month follow-up phase. That's the bottom line study. It's a 330-patient study in 9 centers around the country. It will evaluate, like I said, it's comparing treatment as usual plus vigorous exercise versus health education, and they will be followed for 6 additional months. And we are trying to, because these patients will come into residential treatment settings, we will basically acquire the time of abstinence from the time they start in the study up to 12 weeks as a primary outcome, and then 9 months of total 9 months, 6 months additional for the long term. I'm going to go through this a little more fast. The primary outcome is timeline follow-back, so that is a self-report measure that measures the days of drug use. And the secondary outcome is using urine drug screens. Both of them have advantages and disadvantages. The timeline follow-back allows you to get data for every day of the patient's observation period. The disadvantage is you have to depend on self-report. Urine drug screen is very positive, is objective. The disadvantage is if the patient doesn't show up on the day of having to give the urine drug screen, you do not know if the patient was using drugs or not. And that missing data may drive the outcomes more than anything else. So we'll recruit patients in a residential treatment setting. The reason we went to residential treatment settings was because we wanted to make sure that we have enough time with the participants to at least begin the process of training them on the exercise intervention. And following that residential treatment program, they will be transferred to intensive outpatient, but they will come to the residential treatment program weekly, 3 times a week for a period of up to 12 weeks, and then weekly for the rest of the 6 months in the continuation phase. And all exercise sessions in the acute phase, that is the 12 weeks, 3 times a week, they are supervised at the treatment setting. And then the following 6-month treatment visits will be once a week of supervised session. Yeah, I'm going to skip through the exercise intervention actually in the interest of time, because Mark is going to talk about that just that we are going to use 12 kilocalories per kilogram dose of exercise and to maximize tolerability adherence, it'll be gradually ramped up to the 12 calories over the course of the first 3 weeks. And the intensity also, excuse me, this is patient's intensity, but is 50 to 70% of maximal heart rate. This part was really required a lot of logistics adjustment, and yet we've been insisting on it, and that is after the patient is released from the residential treatment setting, they return to the specified site for one supervised session per week so that they don't, they're not all up on their own to try to exercise. We are clearly using a fairly robust behavioral adherence program to try to ensure that they are going to exercise to the dose we want them to exercise. And the treatment as usual part is the other sort of complicated task because we are going to 9 different settings. Each center will have its own ideal of a treatment as usual. For example, in some settings, group therapy sessions are twice a day, and in some others, they are 3 times a day. But at each site, the study will actually randomize patients to one of 2 interventions one-to-one so that each site will actually provide roughly the equal number of patients in the exercise and the health education arms. The outcome measures are urine drug screen 3 times a week, substance use calendar, craving visual analog scale, withdrawal symptom measure. We're also using extensive psychosocial and quality of life measure. At least our experience with other trials and up to now our experience with the first 130 subjects we have enrolled is that the extensive nature of the assessment battery does not really lead to any major disagreements with the patients. If the patient is willing to come to the treatment setting, they are actually most often willing to provide all the information about their disease. So finally, the unique features of this study, as I mentioned, is that it spans residential treatment and outpatient treatment and aftercare. The duration, total duration in 9 months. Most substance use studies are for shorter duration if they are focused, intensive clinical trials. Longer term trials are not as common, and when they are there, they're not as intensive in terms of monitoring for their urine drug screens as well as timeline follow-back. Sessions are supervised in terms of exercise. There's a behavioral adherence program, and we also have a web-based monitoring system that actually is very helpful for some patients, and others don't necessarily use it as much. Finally, the alternative designs we could have considered, and we did, but we abandoned them for various reasons. So, for example, the most attractive alternative would have been a 3-cell study where we do a high dose versus low dose for the exercise, because you could argue that you want to figure out whether or not we are right on the dose, because there is a likelihood that we may be either overshooting or undershooting on the dose. The problem with that, obviously, is that that is now a third larger, so that the funding for that would be that much larger. And in effect, you're trying to answer 2 questions in one study. One is whether or not exercise is superior to treatment as usual, and whether one dose is better than the other. And at least in my personal bias, answering more than one question in one clinical trial makes it that much less likely you'll succeed.